Good morning. My name is Lindsay Helm. I am the founder and CEO of Empower Employ, and this is Empower Hour. At Empower Hour, we typically introduce to our audience the game changers and employment landscape. We talk about all kinds of topics here related to the military community, and we're so happy to have you here this week. So really excited about the guest this week. Excuse me while I pull this over there. I want to make sure I get this right so I don't mess this up. I have Richelle Futch, whose claim to fame recently is that she just went viral. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about that and her topic. But a little bit more about Richelle is that she is a serial entrepreneur who has built and scaled multiple ventures across technology, education, the nonprofit. Richelle's a former Marine, which is great. So with current special operations and a military spouse, as well as an advocate for military spouse employment with her platform being mental health care and reform. So Richelle is the co-founder and COO of Sponsor Match, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. So let's bring Richelle up to the stage and let her finish telling her story. So welcome my guest, Richelle Futch.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Lindsay, for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. So excuse me for skimming your bio. I figured the other cool things that were in there, we'd probably just let you talk about today. So thanks for joining. So let's get started with, could you tell us a little bit about, you and your current role and what you're, where you are in life, what you're doing?
Yeah, so I would say about 6 years ago, in 2010, I graduated with my master's in social work and went into private practice. I was in counseling and things like that with the state before that. And I worked at the Warrior Transition Battalion, counseling military families and service members, basically soldiers because it was on an Army base. And going into my master's while working there as well, really connected me back to the veteran community because I had been out for a while. And so it was really nice to kind of feel like, oh, that's right. There's this part of me that felt lost just going to work, going to school, doing those things. And so kind of getting pulled back in the community. And then from there, I married my husband and we had a good about 6 years before we had a PCS. And then I had to close my mental health practice down, which was really problematic because I'm licensed in Washington, had a brick and mortar practice, and we had to move to a state I wasn't licensed in. And so that was difficult just with employment and saying goodbye to my clients and starting all over with resources, networks, all those things. And so that's kind of when I started really identifying as an entrepreneur and getting into the digital space and creating courses and workshops and things like that. And so that's kind of where Her Ruck was formed. And Her Ruck is sort of the brand under in which I first started marketing because, with marketing, it really makes sense to have a niche and get into that. So now it's more broadened into like Unpacking Your Emotional Ruck is a workshop that I provide to military families, reserves, National Guard veterans, and military supporters. So people who might work at the VA or other agencies. And so that's kind of where I landed in the mental health practice. And so I'm still doing my private practice and I have these programs set up and I have other trainers that I've trained to help provide those services as well.
Well, that is like a lot, and you're into everything. So I had no idea that you worked at the Warrior Transition Battalion. Secret. I actually worked at a Warrior Transition Battalion at Fort Campbell. It was my first GS job and one of my first jobs after transitioning out of the military. And it's funny, also small world. When we go to Military Influencer, one of the Mighty 25 speakers is actually nominated on the screen, and he was in his recovery and transition phase at the time. And so I'm really excited to see him again. He probably does not remember me, but I'm going to run up to him like a weirdo and be like, hi, I remember when you were getting out. You're so amazing. Thank you for everything you do. So it's a small world after all, if you will. So we talked about Her Ruck, but I think one of the questions I want to talk to you about is, you wrote this amazing article. I think it was last week. It showed up in my newsfeed like last week or the week before. Let's talk about kind of the inspiration behind that and share the story behind it. I know you wrote a thank you post about it, but just wanted to collaborate with you a little bit and hear your side of what you have seen.
I have been in, to be fair, LinkedIn is amazing. And most of the things that I was talking about happens in Facebook groups. And so, in yet another Facebook group for professionals, military professionals, I saw a woman post, should I add that I'm a military spouse on my cover letter, on my profile, or on my resume? And multiple times whenever you see military spouses in communities like that, in those Facebook communities, they usually have a lot of helpful suggestions and then a lot of like just trash talking at them. And this was yet another case that they were almost kind of saying like, why would you take credit for your spouse's career by putting that on your resume? And so my LinkedIn post was kind of a rant, and I really didn't expect more than like 100 people to see it, because that's usually what happens on my LinkedIn. And I was just kind of laying it out that, being a military spouse is not stolen valor. We're not trying to take accomplishments away from our service member. What we're trying to say is, look, I know you might only see my resume and you might not call me for an interview. But if you see that I'm a military spouse, that's going to explain some gaps, or why I might have only been at that job for an hour, for a year or a year and a half. And so just the fact that it's kind of a transparent indicator for people in employment was like, it was huge. Like, why are we not talking about that? And why are we saying that you're just trying to piggyback on your spouse's career when that's not the case? And so I ranted that out, and then it just went.
Like crazy. Yeah, and I think when we talk, and this is one of the reasons that Empower Employee exists, is that we are teaching kind of corporate America about those gaps on a resume, or the explanation for why you may see military spouse with a communications degree that hasn't worked since she graduated college because they've moved 18 million places. Our social workers are actually a really great example. I graduated, I've bebopped around all these places, and I think it's a valid conversation. I always joke at night, and it's an appropriate joke, so it's fine. But people go for like their evening strolls in the afternoon. I feel like some of us do what I call an evening troll, where you like lay on your couch and like scroll through these groups. And I hope that, and I've been attacked on social media, so it's really uncomfortable in that way. So I appreciate you taking the time to go on a rant and share your experience, and use that platform to continue to educate other people. So I'm sure it's a really cool experience. Is it still being shared out everywhere?
It's still being shared. I'm still getting lots of comments and a lot of inbox messages. But again, a lot of the comments I'm getting are, we support you, thank you for your service. And so that conversation around how does this apply to employment isn't really being talked about, which I think is a big miss right now.
Yeah. And I think I want to talk about sponsored match while I have you too, but I think the last piece on this is, I think for me, I don't feel like I'm really accepted by either community. So I'm curious how you feel about this. So like, as a veteran, I think people forget that like I served in the military, and I also don't want the recognition, and somebody to come up to me and be like, thank you for your service.
Mhm.
Thank you, because that's the polite thing to say, but like, I had my reasons. We all had our reasons, and I'm grateful. It was a volunteer scenario for me. But then at the same time, military spouses are like, but you don't understand, like, blah, or whatever that is. And if and that's kind of like, no, I really do. In fact, I see it from both sides. Please use me as an advocate, which makes us even more of like a force multiplier kind of in the employment space, right? I could talk about it from both sides. Do you feel like you don't fit into one side or the other? Or do you feel like you have a different view because you serve first?
I feel like when I'm with my vet community, I feel like I fit in and it's really comfortable. And then when I feel like when I'm with my military spouse community, I feel like I fit in. But they're really different hats, and the way you communicate with them are a lot different. It's very, very different. And to be able to adjust so quickly that when we go to events like MIC or something like that, it does make it a little more difficult because you're surrounded by both, and it's like your two sort of communities or personalities colliding. And yeah, and so it's really trying to find authentically, who am I in both, and who am I as a person, with these identities and these conflicting yet same identities, right? Because we're in this community, but they're from different angles and different views. And that's one of the things that when I talk to other social workers, I just got back from Chicago from speaking at the Military Foundation, or Social Work Foundation's conference. And I was speaking to a bunch of social workers. And one of the things we talked about is what does that look like for acculturation, the acculturation model? How does that apply to military families? Um, and what happens to our identity when we transition out? And so really understanding what assimilation is versus integration and separation and marginalization, and really getting a grasp for that in organizations is helpful. And for the individual to really say, am I integrated fully in my identity as a military spouse, as a veteran, as a mom, as a wife, as a woman, as a business owner, all these things, right? That's all parts of us. And so how do we get that through line that's really that authentic self amongst all those things? And that can be difficult because we get swayed by the energy of the room, right? We get swayed by that, and it speaks to a large one part of us just gets larger and larger when we're around our tribe like that. And so it can feel a little exhausting, overwhelming, and challenging.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to MICBA for all of those reasons. And I'm also like, please just, and it's such a supportive environment anyway. So everyone's going to love you regardless. But I'm like, please just love me and take me for both. Okay. So let's transition over and talk about Sponsor Match. You know, there seems to be some momentum around Sponsor Match. You're a serial entrepreneur. You have your hand in everything. Tell us a little bit more about Sponsor Match, what it is, how it came to life, and, you know, all the things.
Absolutely. Sponsor Match really was sort of this idea that came from frustration in my workshop, I mean, the Heroic program that I had. So I was trying to figure out, how do I get to military installations, you know, when they pay for your workshop to come. Sometimes they don't have funding until the last minute. Sometimes they don't have, you know, all these things that fall into place. And I was able to connect with a sponsor. So I have Safe Project as one of my sponsors that actually brings me. They pay for the venue, they coordinate all the people, they do all the marketing, and they pay for me to come and speak. And I'm like, wow, sponsorship is amazing. Why don't we do more of that? And I was speaking with one of my other co-founders, who's also a speaker, and she was having some of the same issues. And so we were like, there has to be some place that would just be easy to find and connect with sponsors that want what we have to give to their people. And so we actually, this is funny because our CEO and other co-founder, Flossie, Kristen and I actually pitched her with a pitch deck to like come on board. And you know, like when you're like, ice cream's a great dessert, but then somebody's like, well, what about a sundae? And you have all like the whipped cream and the toppings and all the things. That's what Flossie kind of brought to the idea, was yes, and then just like our minds all meshed really well together. And so we're creating a digital marketplace that connects sponsor seekers with sponsor providers in a way that educates the sponsors, the sponsees, so they're ready to pitch to sponsors. Because the last thing you want to do is have all this work and then send the wrong things. And if you don't know and you haven't been educated, those mistakes are really easy to make. I mean, something as simple as using a company's logo in your pitch, and they have copyright on that logo, and they're like, wait a minute, I didn't give you permission even in your pitch to use my logo. So there's like small things that you might not know that you shouldn't do. And then also having education for people who are a business and they don't know that they can sponsor. What if they can only afford like $500 or $1,000 or up to $10,000, and they don't have a community partnership program created? We're going to show them how to do that. And then we're going to give them this space to connect with people through a filtered system that actually makes sense to find the right community partner. And then make sure that we're following them all the way through their deliverables and making sure that they maintain those relationships. And so it's really exciting.
That does sound exciting, because I'm kind of like, oh, you want me to come speak? I don't have anybody to manage that for me, or we need sponsorships, whatever that is. So it's going to be really nice to see that kind of come to life. So we know currently you're working on Sponsor Match, but who helped you get to where you are? Do you have a specific mentor that, you know, helped you get here?
I have a few mentors because I think mentorship is so important. Flossie has been amazing. She's one of those CEOs that's like, hey, let me teach you what you might not know, or do you know how to do this? And so that's been really helpful. I have another great mentor who's been with kind of in the vet community. Tom Antion has been amazing at just helping me fine tune a lot of my residual incomes and what that looks like and how to really tap into what a sponsorship would look like, specifically for my own business. And so just putting in the work, because, you know, entrepreneurs, right? We have we start out and we're like, well, I have this time, but I have no money. And so we can't always hire people to solve our problems for us or to be those things. And it's not wise to let somebody else manage those areas of your business. So we start taking courses, webinars, reading books, all the things in our spare time to really build and develop. And so this has been a labor of love. I mean, really, since my journey began in like 2016, just in entrepreneurship, aside from like owning my own private practice and things like that. So.
Yeah, I got introduced to a really amazing mentor 2 days ago, and they said something, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's genius. It was awesome. So mentorship is crucial both in, your transition journey, in your career journey. It's just in general, just overall super important. So I'm going to ask you two more questions, and then we'll just kind of say goodbye to everybody. So currently right now, Richelle, what is the best piece of advice you can give to the veteran community when they're feeling defeated in their business?
I would say absolutely join a veteran community, like an entrepreneur community. I know the Vetpreneur Tribe on Facebook has a warrior council. That's pretty amazing. You have a handful of people that are just showing up every week with advice, with their network. And so there's a lot of accelerators out there. There's a lot of people that are wanting to help specifically military affiliated families. And so get community, because you don't have to do it alone. It feels like you're doing it alone, but you can find community.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I'll support you in that comment. I know without our community, the community I've had, I'll give them a huge shout out. I won't list them all by name, but like literally had to put up with me last week, like crabby, crying, like don't want to do this anymore. And it felt super, super lonely. But at the end of the day, like being able to go back to them and be like, thank you so much for your support. I'm sorry I had a meltdown. It's really, really, really nice. Okay, so last hot seat question that we ask everyone, it's kind of become like the fun thing, is what was your favorite duty station and why?
I loved Camp Pendleton in California. I think I'm a sun girl. And so being down in Southern California, especially at that time in my life, was a lot of fun, great weather, everything about it. I loved it. Aside from the specific job, I think the specific job I had was one of those that wasn't challenging enough for me. And so I was taking college courses on the side and just kind of feeling like I needed to get through that. But the duty station itself, oh, Southern California, I loved it.
So shameless plug, if you're a sun girl, Hawaii has lots of sun, and I like a lot of people that work at your company. They're some of my favorite people in the world. So I feel like Sponsor Match and Empower Employee needs to put together like our own little like conference. Maybe we'll do a conference and create our own conference. Let's talk about this. So stay tuned for those details as we plotted a plan live on air. So kind of the last, in closing, I want to thank you for joining us. But how do people get in contact with you if they want to learn more about Sponsor Match, HerRuck, all the things that you have to share with the world? What's the best way?
Absolutely. You can connect with me directly on my LinkedIn. And if you would like to sign up to be one of our beta users for Sponsor Match, please go to the website sponsormatch.us and just sign up, and we will be giving you all the details here shortly. And then if you're interested in the HerRuck, then you can go to herruck.com or go to richellefutch.com and connect with me there. And I respond to every message.
I want to be like, I volunteer as tribute for the Sponsor Match adventure. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone tune in, not next week, but the week after. I'm taking a break for a week to go do some traveling, and we'll do a live, I think from Warrior Rising, where Richelle and I are both going to be. And we will see you then. So thanks for watching, everyone.